Sabah everybody and welcome back to the channel. Xiaomi just finally unveiled their brand new Mi 10T line of devices. We have the Mi 10T Pro, the Mi 10T, and of course the Mi 10T Lite. But in the office today, I have for you guys the brand new Mi 10T Pro, the best of the best that Xiaomi has to offer at the end of 2020. This is TK. Let's go ahead and check out all the cool new features of the brand new Mi 10T Pro 5G. Like and subscribe and make sure you hit that bell icon so that you're always notified too whenever we have new videos on the channel. So there we have it, the brand new Mi 10T Pro 5G from Xiaomi. And of course, the overall experience that we're looking at here essentially is that they just announced 3 new devices. This is going to be the best that they offer at the end of 2020. And the best part about this is that it now supports 144 Hertz display. That's one of the best features. Now, when it comes down to the actual packaging here, it's pretty straightforward. What we get in the box essentially is a case protector, a charger, a 33-watt charger that supports the 5,000 milliampere battery that we have here, a USB-C to USB Type-A cable for data charging as well as transfer, and last but not least, a 3.5mm headphone jack adapter since we don't have a headphone jack on the Mi 10T Pro. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward, very nice and very simple. When we look at both of these devices, obviously there's some design changes that they went with. Overall, the fingerprint sensor now is present on the right side, included in the power button. Also, the stereo speakers that we have on the device are actually a little bit different. On the Mi 10T, there used to be one on the top, one on the bottom, firing sideways. So they both were firing sideways. In the brand new Mi 10T Pro, they've changed the scenario now that they have one front-facing and one side-facing, pretty much giving us a slightly better experience with the front-facing earpiece, and they are well balanced. The fingerprint sensor is ridiculously fast. That's the best way to describe it. Obviously now with MIUI 12, we support lock screen video wallpapers, and this is how I'm able to get my Dragon Ball stuff on here, as everybody that watches the channel is always a big fan of. So the overall experience here is a 6.67 inch 144 Hertz display, so it goes all the way to 144. It gives us the ability of using it at 60, 90, and 144. So where we had it with the Mi 10 Pro, basically a 60 at a 90 Hertz, now we have 60, 90, and of course 144. Keeping in mind that basically the best performance will always be at the highest refresh rate, although that also comes at consumption of battery. The other thing that we'll also notice the difference between the two devices is they actually went away from the curved edge device here, like the Mi 10T Pro and the in-display fingerprint sensor, and now it's basically a flat display with a side-mounted fingerprint sensor on the right. We still have pretty much the same kind of configuration, IR blaster, the 108 megapixel sensor in the back, a 13 megapixel sensor ultra-wide, and a 5 megapixel macro lens. And of course, on the front, we have a 20 megapixel sensor that's capable of providing us obviously 1080p 30 frames per second maximum for video, and up to 8K 30 frames per second here on the back with the primary shooter, and 4K 30 frames per second with the ultra-wide, of course. Overall, the aesthetics are pretty much very similar to what we've seen before. We have the Snapdragon 865. We're powering this device. We have the X55 modem for 5G. There's going to be a couple of variants, but both of them will include 8 gigs of internal RAM as far as the RAM's there, and of course 128 or 256. The model that I have here is basically 128. There is no expandable storage, but we do have a dual SIM tray present here on the bottom, next to the microphone, of course, USB-C, and the bottom firing speaker that marries to the top earpiece to provide us with that stereo experience. Pretty much clean here on the left. On the top, we have an IR blaster and obviously one of the microphones. On the right side, volume rocker power button that is also integrated with the fingerprint sensor. And the last thing I want to share with you guys here is that this also does not include wireless charging. But other than that, both of these devices are both very, very strong, both running MIUI 12 out of the box, now upgraded here on the Mi 10 Pro. So definitely you're not going to be missing out. And of course, Xiaomi is working on Android 11 based MIUI 12 in the near future. Available in beta on certain models of the Mi 10 Pro, not all of them though. So the launcher that we have here is by default supporting an app drawer. You're obviously able to customize it. As I mentioned to you guys at the beginning, also we have now AI face unlocking as well as the fingerprint sensor for biometrics, but we also have the ability of using videos for our lock screen because of the new MIUI 12 functionality. So this is running the global ROM, so just kind of a point of reference. And of course, Google Play services installed out of the box. Everything is pretty much set, and we had quite a few things installed. So we have the Mi community, the music, the theme store, the cleaner, the security, all of those things are typical. I did download some benchmarking applications just with references, of course. So I ran this benchmark not that long ago with the 865. And of course, if we go into history with the OpenCL option, it's up at 3116. So actually a pretty good performer. There was never an issue with this, and I think MIUI has improved quite a bit as far as the overall gesture support. Now I did turn on the new notification panels. Swipe down from the left, I get access to the notification. It's pretty simple. Swiping up from the bottom takes me directly into the app drawer, and of course we have access to just basically be able to customize everything. And we have the search option here. MIUI 12 is something that we've covered in the past, and of course it looks really nice, very functional. Everything is categorized, all the options that you'd expect to see here. Of course, logging into your Mi account, customizing your experience. As far as the actual specifications, again, MIUI 12, 128 gigs of internal storage, out of which 37.9 I've used already. We've installed a few games in there. Last but not least is we're running the September 1st security patch update. And again, as I mentioned to you guys, Android 10.0 in the box. And we should be able to get Android 11 soon, MIUI 12, hopefully in the near future. Now, as far as customization, as I mentioned to you guys, we have a 5,000 milliampere battery, but basically, let's look at it this way. The lower the refresh rate, the more savings that you're going to be using. But we have a massive battery that charges pretty quickly with a 33-watt charger. Again, that's the one that's included in the box. So I don't really see any reason why we should be actually using anything lower. Unfortunately, it is a 1080p panel, which means that for the most part, at 144 and 90 or at 60, you're getting the same experience there. They do have basically a dedicated game system, or basically a game launcher called Game Turbo. And of course, you can download and install different applications, and of course, download. And if you don't see them in the launcher, hit the plus button and go through the options that you have in there directly and find whichever one that are missing. If they're not, you can just add them back in there and get back into the launcher. Now, for fun, I actually did also install Kishi. This is the Razer Kishi controller that I love playing with. The reason behind that is it expands to actually allow us to hold our device in it, and it becomes more like a game controller. And so what I mean by this essentially is I just house the phone here, and this one, because it's actually on the longer end, the 6.67-inch display, it actually barely makes it, which really makes it very functional. So let's go ahead and hit close. And what I want to show you guys real quick is a couple of things. Now, top speaker is a front-facing speaker, but the back speaker is the bottom-firing speaker, and there's a couple of vents here in the Kishi controller that allow the sound to permeate from the bottom out, so you're not losing anything. And of course, this will also show you guys the games that are compatible with it. So Modern Combat Versus and Dead Trigger 2 were the ones that were supported in my device. We have access to the Game Center, which gives us the ability of launching video recording, and of course taking snippets, sharing, and of course sharing any information here, or launching different applications at the same time. Now, before we get into the actual gaming experience, I want to share with you guys obviously how does the sound perform on here. So this is again my favorite song, Alex Scrindo Jumbo by NCS. I have the volume set to 100%. We'll go ahead and play a little bit for you guys.
Jack it up.
As you can hear, it sounds absolutely fantastic. Now, as far as the games that I've installed on here, I've installed a few games that I really like, especially games that I know will work at 144 Hertz. So, Dead Trigger 2 runs at 144 Hertz, and I did confirm that in the settings, as well as Real Racing 3. PUBG runs at the best with 60 frames per second. Call of Duty runs at 60 frames per second as well. Modern Combat Versus, I also ran it at the maximum resolution. You guys a couple of samples here of some gameplay directly on with the Kishi controller and directly with this one. I really hope that the footage did do it justice as far as the experience and what we can expect using it here. One thing before I go too far, I did run a speed test here. I'm not currently picking up on 5G because I'm using this on AT&T here in the US. I am getting 4G LTE, and as far as the speed test, I was able to get a maximum of 60. And again, depends on where you are, because you can kind of see where the other connection kind of went a little bit bad. But like 60 down, 25 up, I think is pretty respectable for connections, especially over that. But if you're going to use it with Wi-Fi and you have, let's say, a Wi-Fi 6 router, this is going to work great. And of course, supports almost anything that you want to be able to install on it. Now, let's go ahead and start talking about the camera setup and what we get in here. We have triple cameras on the back, again, at 108, a 13, and a 5. So essentially, for the most part, when we're using it standard, this is going to be our 108 megapixel sensor. And the 108 megapixel sensor gives us the ability of actually zooming in all the way up to 30 times directly by just pressing the button. So we have single, double, and of course all the way up to 130. Now the double, the 2 times here is optical, but again, because of the 108 megapixel sensor, it actually works pretty well and it does it justice. We're able to shoot up to 1080p 30 frames per second on the front-facing camera and up to 8K 30 frames per second on the back sensor, as well as 4K 60 frames, 4K 30, all the standard options that we normally get. The 13 megapixel sensor that we have on the back, the ultra wide, is only capable of going up to 4K at 30 frames per second on the back sensor. And of course, the macro lens is something that you actually need to turn on by clicking the little sandwich menu, jumping over to macro. And there's a few more things here. The front-facing camera actually has quite a bit of tricks as far as what would say up its sleeve. So as you guys are looking with some of the pictures I'm taking there from some portrait imagery that we can do there, you're able to obviously do portrait. You have the ability of doing a time lapse, night shots, as well as long exposures, all using the actual system that we have in here. And as you kind of see with the images that I'm sharing with you guys as we're talking, the actual images look pretty good, especially with macro photography when we're getting closer to the actual subject. And last thing, as I showed you right there, is an 8K 30 frames per second shot. Again, shot right there in the backyard during a nice sunny day. So just to see kind of the dynamic range and the performance on the video there. But let's not waste any time. Let me show you guys a quick sample on the front-facing camera and the back-facing camera on the Mi 10T Pro. Now we're switching to the 108 megapixel sensor that we have here on the back. It's capable of shooting 8K at 30 frames per second as well as 4K 60 frames per second. Now we have obviously 3 sensors here. There's the 108, that's your standard focal length. There's the 13 ultra wide and the 5 megapixel, that's technically a macro lens. So definitely a very capable lens that should be able to provide us some really good images. Again, 108 megapixel sensor. Now when we switch it over to the front-facing sensor, even though this is a 20 megapixel sensor, we're actually capped at 1080p 30 frames per second. I know obviously we don't have multiple sensors, although they do include a few extra modes in here that we typically don't see, like time lapse, and I think there's also night photography, of course, for, portrait and all of those. But again, a 20 megapixel sensor, 1080p 30 maximum resolution on the front, all the way up to 8K on the main sensor in the back. I do have to say that I appreciate the fact that Xiaomi is putting in not only it's a large display, it's a flat display, great for gaming, 144 Hertz, the stereo speakers are still there. We have a large 5000 milliampere battery, 8 gigs of RAM. MIUI 12 is actually very nice and very functional. I like the updates that they did to the system, specifically when it comes to the fact that I'm actually able to now put in videos on the lock screen, which for me, if you guys have followed all of my Samsung coverage, is always a big plus. I love having some Dragon Ball stuff, and this isn't limited to that, by the way. You can take your own video and put it up there, but again, it just opens up the opportunities for many people to enjoy their content to the best or to the fullest. So I'll give you guys a link in the description below for the rest of the announcement that Xiaomi did today. Again, there was 3 devices that were announced: the Mi 10T Pro, the Mi 10, and the Mi 10 Lite, or Mi 10T Lite. So hopefully, if I do get my hands on any of the other devices, I'll definitely do some videos and some coverage for you guys. But please, please, please let me know in the comments below, what do you think about the new Mi 10T Pro? Are you excited with the fact that they decided to go with the higher refresh rate, more gaming-focused experience with the stereo speakers on the Mi 10T line or the Mi 10 line at the end of 2020? This is TK. I'll see you guys in the next video.